Welcome to Amy's Bookshelf Reviews podcast. I'm Amy Shannon, but you can call me Amy. Thank you for listening. Hello and welcome, and I hope all is well with you. I'm Amy, and today I'm talking about a short story contest that I ran back in December into January of this year, December of last year into January of this year. And I had one author, who had sent in two short stories. Um, Not only she did win by default because there was two categories that she could write a short story about, but also her stories were really good. She's a published author, so Carol Ann Ross, a shout out to you and being a winner of the short story contest. I started thinking that maybe a short story contest for Amy's Bookshelf Reviews didn't mesh, but I do get a lot of authors sending me their short stories, wanting me to read them, for their input. Not necessarily something that, for a review, but just kind of for my opinion about their work. And I love reading short stories because I've been working on some short stories myself. um, I finished my nonfiction historical book. I did a book signing recently, and I did all the things that I would give advice to other authors, and it seemed to work. So I was like, wow, because I researched my advice, but when I followed my own advice, it actually worked out for me. Um, I honestly thought the short story contest was, kind of not successful because I only had one author sending me short stories. But then she said that I should try again. So, um, with that, I thought about it, but then I was getting emails from other authors who also like to write short stories. And they're like, oh, I can't believe I missed this, So I decided to create a new short story contest. Um, One of the winning things is for me to read it on this podcast. Um, there is a new short story contest started April 1st, and I will take stories until June 30th, 2024. There is a specific topic that the story needs to revolve around and some genres accepted. So the topic is AI or technical pre or post apocalyptic. Genres accepted: sci-fi, romance, supernatural, paranormal, thriller, chiller, or horror. You can go to Amy's Bookshelf Reviews / short story contest, / short story contest. And it will give you all the details about the short stories, the requirements for the short stories, and also what the first place winner wins. And then there will be two honorable mentions. So that would be second and third place. And they will also receive something as well. And as I mentioned, one of the um, rewards is for me to read it on air on my podcast. So that's what I plan on doing. Today I have Carol Ann Ross, who is a wonderful author. So make sure you look her up on Amazon and see if any of her books are of interest to you. And the first short story of hers I'm going to read is called Image Jury. So please bear with me. I may have to take a drink now and then. So here I go. Image Jury by Carol Ann Ross. Maria looked lovingly at the tiny baby lying peacefully in the frilled bassinet. The tiny fingers were perfection, as were her toes. The tiny transparent nails on each were beautiful too, as were her limbs and torso. Everything was perfect. Maria smiled as her eyes studied the tiny form, the delicate flawlessness of the body of her baby Ariel. Then her eyes rested on the face. They closed for a moment as she inhaled a breath. Opening them, rivers of tears flowed down her. She bit her lip and stood her and shook her head, still looking at Ariel's face. Bowing her head, Maria bit her lip again, studying the child's eyes as she sighed deeply. Well, she spoke aloud, whimpering. The physician had said the baby didn't have problems. Dr. Phillips had gone into detail the day Ariel was born, but Maria had turned her head that day, blocking out a description of a defective child that she had grown to love in the womb. Her husband, Royal, had listened. She had felt the grasp of his fingers tighten on her hand as the doctor spoke. Afterward, he held her chin in his hand. I'm so sorry, my love. He said the words softly and stayed by her for a long time. Reaching a finger to Ariel, Maria stopped and turned as Royal walked into the nursery. His sad eyes met her, his arms reaching out to wrap around her waist and pull her close. Together, they looked longingly into her crib. Maybe we should have. No, no, I could never. Shh, it's okay. We'll make it through. We're just fortunate we have the mirror. Maria nodded. Oh, how she loved the baby. She couldn't fathom not having her, even if it was for a short while. We gave her life. She gazed into her husband's eyes. He nodded back. Yes, she gets to know what life is, even if for only a short while. Maria reached her hand to stroke the baby's hair. Ariel cooed. Her eyes twinkled, and her small mouth, rounded them gently, began to curl at the edges. See, she's experiencing joy. Life is pleasing to her. Squeezing his wife's hand, Royal's eyes teared too. He thought of the hope, the plans, the shared expectations. About a year, I think the doctor said about a year. And yes, we have the mirror. Her eyes questioned to reaffirm his earlier statement. Yes, if we need it, you know. I know, we may not need it. I hope, though. Maria's eyes swelled with tears once again, and she caught her trembling breath. Kissing her softly on the forehead, Royal turned. I have to get to work, sweetheart. See you this afternoon. She nodded and kissed his cheek in return, and then watched as he exited the nursery. Closing the door behind him, she felt the loneliness envelop her. Oddly enough, the loneliness was soothing. Being alone with this flawed little creature was nice. It was hers. The baby had come from her body. Leaning against the door, Maria let her eyes slowly scan the pink room. A white Jenny Lind spindle crib sat in the center, pink and white, pink and yellow, pink and aqua, pink from the curl lathe post. Maria recalled how she and her friend Rita had shopped at the baby stores and how she and Royal had picked out colors. It had all been so much fun. All the anticipation had set her in another world, one full of joy and one of the making of a family a little better than the one she had come from. Maria strolled to the lace curtain windows. She ran along the rocking chair railing, stopping at the wall calendar. She touched the date bubbles. They changed from pink to aqua, to teal to mauve, and back again. The little gray elephants, blowing the bubbles, winked and smiled. Maria thought how cruel they were. How could they be happy with such calamity around them? Focusing only on the bubbles, Maria allowed her index finger to rest on the child's birthday, April 15th, 2095. There had been so much hope on that day. No, not hope, but promise. She slid an eye to the elephants again, wishing that they were extinct. Frowning as she recalled a news blurb, only 12 left on the planet. She didn't care, squaring her jaw. Maria regretted the thought. That's not right. I shouldn't think that way. I shouldn't wish anything away. Closing her eyes to an overwhelming ache of love and confusion, she felt even hope and promise had become extinct too. She had been told this might happen, a deep depression, the baby blues. Postpartum it was called, or something like that. She had been told it was quite common occurrence for William who gave birth to their own babies, or for people experiencing trauma or those a sudden disappointment. Pills were available for that. Even operations were available. But Maria felt odd about these types of remedies. In fact, she had feelings a lot about a lot of things deep down inside her that she never shared with anyone, not even one. Her eyes slid to the elephants again. Poor elephants, they can't help where they are. Maria half grinned and rested a finger on the elephant's images. The caricatures winked and smiled, from one tear of them made its way from the small gray eye to the tip of the trunks. The other elephant slowly sadly looked sadly at her and raised her trunks. Maria guessed in a show of compassion. Their expression caused Maria for a moment, but only for a moment, before she heard cries from the bassinet. The door to the room opened and Aggie entered. She smiled and nodded to Maria as she made her way to the baby. Gathering the child in her arms, she left the room. Feeding time, Maria exhaled loudly, wondering what that entailed. In all the month that they had brought Ariel home, she had never seen the baby being fed or diapered for that matter. The bassinet was programmed to detect bodily functions and needs, and Aggie had been hired to take care of those things. Maria vaguely remembered her mother telling her how her great grandmother had breastfed her mother. The thought repulsed her. That's something dogs, cats, and elephants do. I am a good mother. I want the best for my child, she reproved herself. Aggie knows what to do. It's her position in life. She thought for a moment, but I'm important too. Maria held her shoulders stiffly and continued speaking to the empty room. I'm curious, though. I always have been. She frowned, pulled her lips tight, and thought about how she had hidden that trait, the frown upon the trait of curiosity. Why is it so bad? She thought. Despite everyone saying I couldn't, that I shouldn't, that it was archaic, chose to do the commencement procedure. I wanted to know what it was like for people, for women. Maria had read a few letters her mother had hidden, the words of feelings that she couldn't quite comprehend. They sound so magical. So I wanted to have a child, to have it better too. She looked at the little elephants and they looked forlornly back. Thinking how Royal had acted when she told him she was with child reassured her too. He had been sullen. In fact, he had been quite calm. At first, he suggested the procedure to terminate. That's what anyone did if a mistake happened. But they went for a long walk in the park and talked long, talked, and before long his attitude changed and he became protective and definitely and decisively supportive. The doctor says everything will be fine, but no promises if the baby isn't regulation. Royal told his wife after a visit to the physician. And now, Maria thought, little Ariel is not perfect. She's not regulation. Life would be hard for her. Maria recalled her own childhood. It was certainly not ideal. She vaguely remembered the years she had to consider time, prepare schedules, style her own hair. Remember those menial tasks that so long ago. She'd simply programmed herself to do these things. There was no worrying about schedules or mundane chores, no worrying about anything. Wasn't that the goal? Wasn't that the way life was supposed to be? Now everything came at will. Certainly, this is the way it should be. This was the right one, wasn't it? Even finding a husband had been no problem. It had been easy and so unlike her mother's ways when people went through many suitors before settling for one. Maria crinkled her nose in disgust, thinking of how vulgar that would have been. But Royal, he was just there, waiting in her office as he belonged there. Their attraction was instantaneous, and when he kissed her on their second date, she knew he was the one. Their romance was passionate, or so Maria believed. Royal had said so too. A ceremony was performed by the company's CEO a month after they met. It was a wonderful that it was wonderful that the company took care of so many things. They even allowed Royal and she to have freedom to choose their home. And after offering a list of cities, styles of homes, and modes of transportation, they made a free, unsolicited selection. There was even a clause in the marriage agreement that at any time they would be allowed two skin tone changes and two options to change body style. They were set. The company said, you are set for life. Who could say she and Royal did not have free will? Who could say she was not in control of her own life? Who could say that they were not free to be who they wanted. As a bonus, Maria and Royal were offered intimacy patterns. This the list was placed before them, and after much discussion, they chose the program for their sexual act for every second Tuesday of each month. Royal was allowed to masturbate on Saturdays, and Maria was allowed to do so on Sundays. This schedule allows them to watch the wall screen at their leisure and to incorporate other people into their lives, of course, all coming from the list. It was a comprehensive list, chock full of activities and thought programs, just anything anyone could want. Before Maria's mother had passed, she told her daughter how sad it was to see a generation who had no idea what life was all about. There's more to life than what they say. I want you to have more. Hearing a muffled giggle from the adjoining room and curious, Maria walked closer to listen, perhaps for more sound of laughter from her daughter. I do now, Mamma, Maria whispered. I have more. She added, whispering, the company cannot give me what Ariel does. No amount of self-correction, lesions, or SCL will ever give me that. Wondering why those things were necessary and how other things had become normal. Maria plowed through present day norms and followed her curiosity. It was like walking a tightrope. She kept revelations secret, subtly searching Royal's thoughts, waiting to see if he too had questions. Since Ariel's arrival, he seemed more pliable and open to ideas. Still, Maria was careful. She was aware that the company had provided so much for her family, and she knew what they provided was good and the correct manner in which to progress. Mostly, she shrugged. I know what they want. I know they want what is best for everyone, and they did say that if I followed their guidelines, Ariel would not have been born so disfigured. If, the doctor had said, you would follow the instructions and not have put your body through the commencement procedure, you would see a child with a different face, not this disappointment. Maria inhaled deeply. He was right. It ached her to know the child would have to go life so disfigured. But everything is as it should be, she purred loudly to herself. Her body is so perfect. Maria heard the echo of her mother's voice. Can't cry over spilled milk. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Nodding, she smiled. Think of Ariel. I have her now, and I will do my best. And then she thought of the time. Only a year, but Dr. Phillips had warned. You'll be lucky to get that. Maria knew she must obey Dr. Phillips. After all, he was a doctor, and he knew better. Thank goodness he had found a loophole, and that they had allowed her commencement procedure. It had been discarded decades ago after it was found and proven by science that it could cause grave injury to the human body and maybe even cancer. Since she and Royal wanted Charlie so badly, they had been able to persuade the doctors to allow the birth. Of course, it was all kept secret. Despite the chances of abnormalities, the procedure went off beautifully. They were safe, just as if the surrogate had been used. How embarrassing it was to know her mother had been a surrogate. How demoralizing it was to know where she came from. How fortunate Maria was to have found a way out of that lifestyle. She wondered for a moment, will I have to hide Ariel too? Oh, she quickly answered herself, in a year. I have only a year. She has a year. But I get to love my baby for a year. Ariel will know love for a year, joy for a year, wonder for a year. Calming her, calming herself as the door to the nursery opened. Maria grinned gaily to Aggie and Nance. Do you have children of your own? No, ma'am. My family was one of the ones chosen to not have children. Sorry, no big problem. It's easier this way. I don't get so attached. Attached? Maria asked. No, ma'am. I see how you worry over this one. I see you crying all the time, and I don't know what for. She seems like a beautiful little child. May I ask, ma'am, why do you cry so much? Maria lowered her eyes. Would you like to hold her? I'm only to hold her between the hours of 7 and 9 twice a day. Oh, come on. This lovely girl would love to be held by you. Aggie held the baby towards its mother. A smile beamed across Maria's face as she held her arms together the baby. She felt its tiny fingers tug at her blouse, its warmth against her body. She heard the light breaths and saw the sparkle of Aria's eyes. Oh, how she did love her. But I shouldn't get too close, Aggie, the doctor said a year. Oh, but a year of love? A year of light and smiles and sweet caresses? Who would want a year of that? Give it to her, man. Give her that if that's all she gets. And in return, giving love. It's so much better when you give it back, when you get it back. Aggie saw Maria's eyes as she held them. But they said, hot air, what they said. There is nothing better than pure love. That's all you can give her, right? Yes, but it's only a year. And look at her face, Aggie. There's nothing wrong with her face. Two eyes, two eyebrows, a sweet little nose, and rosebud lips. This child is beautiful. But we asked for amber eyes. We didn't want the cleft in her chin. The nose is too long. Nothing in her facial features is what we were told would be part of her. Is there anything else wrong with her? Maggie touched the infant's chest and abdomen. Are her organs inside okay? The doctor she has something called an appendix. And another thing, her jaw formation. She may have crooked teeth, one nostril slightly smaller than the other. She has a mole, that nasty mark on her temple. No, he says in 1 year we will bring her to the hospital. Then what? If she does not pass away before then, he will take the necessary steps. Aggie thought for a moment, her brow furrowed as she raised a finger to her chin. That's dumb. She looks so healthy, Aggie giggled. She eats like a horse. There's nothing wrong with her. So what if, Aggie, she's not really what we wanted? Then why the hell did you, her mouth tightly, Aggie asked. What you wanted, ha! She dare not ask what she thought about what the baby wants. It had been so long since babies had no desires except to eat, sleep, and poop. Torn, Maria still clung to the baby. I have to think about how she would be accepted, with facial defects. Her jaw clenching, Aggie's eyes rolled to the ceiling, and here it came, the degradation, the reminder that she was the one not perfect. But how was she to help that? How was she to have control of what her parents had? Aggie, I don't mean to hurt your feelings, but you see, your teeth and your hairline, your chin is too long. I'm sure you've had a hard time finding clothes, or do you make your own? Well, your size is not right. I don't mean that you are stupid or anything, but Aggie, if your parents have been some kind of changes to you before you were born, isn't it difficult for you? Don't you wish sometimes? She has the mirror, Aggie spoke. Yes, we have a mirror. It allows her to see what we really wanted in a child. The mirror will reflect the perfect image, amber eyes, a perfect nose, no skin blemishes, and a perfect oval face. The medications prescribed by Dr. Phillips will help reconstruct her, and if they don't, they will help her pass calmly, quietly, calmly, without pain, and she will pass. In that a year, you will give her up. You will let this lovely child go away if she does not change. Maria held the baby close to her and leaned to kiss her brow before placing the baby in the bassinet. In the year I have ready myself, I will be prepared for what needs to be. I will not be selfish and set my daughter out into a world that will look down on her and treat her less human. Descending the stairs from the basement, Aggie shook her head, thinking of how fortunate her employers would have her working for them. Oh, it could be a pain, but that was the way it was. Things have changed from when she was a child. She sighed at the thought. Nowadays, there were things that couldn't be said, even thought. Certain words have been deleted from the dictionaries. There were certain expressions that were no longer tolerated, and others that were enforced, if not by the poles, then by neighbors, the company, and even family. Aggie was careful with what she said and did. It was a thin tightrope to walk, but she was careful. She, so far, things have gone well since she had been working for Royal and Marine number 82. Yes, they're lucky to have me. I might be up in years, but I'm good at my job. I don't steal, and like some of them do, and I've learned to smile when they tell me to do things so they think I'm happy to do it. doing things that keeps them under the impression that I like them. She tittered to herself. An unhappy boss is your loss. That's what Mama always said. Aggie smiled, recalling the woman who raised her. Jerry was her name. Aggie pictured her face somewhat long, her nose broad. The warmth of her memory oozed through the petite, soft woman. Mama had the prettiest eyes, always smiling. Aggie spoke aloud as she entered her room and made her way to the recliner. Propping her feet aloft the stand, she relaxed and thought about sneaking off, ran partially ran partially to browse the shelf. She could certainly pick up few items there rather cheaply. Sighing at the thought, she decided against the trip to the super shopping mart because if her employers found out that she had been there, they could begin treating her differently. She'd seen that happen. It was well nigh a social sin to be caught in frenulite. Aggie chuckled at the thought and relaxed to bask in the warmth of a few childhood memories of her mother and the explanation of her childhood question. Long time ago, everybody had babies, at least women did. It was kind of a guessing game as to what they turned out, color of their eyes, shape of their face, their hair. Babies, little people were all so different. Why? Aggie had asked her mother so long ago. Jerry had shrugged. I don't know, but it changed around 50 years ago. So that some people could do. She hummed for a moment, and her forefinger pressed against her chin. Ah, designer babies, that's what it was. So parents could have exactly what they wanted, and so women wouldn't have to put strain or stress on their bodies, so their image would be the way it should be. Aggie remembered the cool, strong hands of her mother touching her face as she spoke to her daughter. How fortunate she was to receive the love, the patience, and guidance. Aggie hoped she could impart those things to kicking the baby she took care of. Uh, she could impart those things to the baby she took care of. Kicking off her shoe, she leaned further back in a recliner and closed her eyes. I am so sorry you will never have a child. I am so sorry my station in life will not afford you that. Jerry explained when her daughter asked. Oh, you can marry, but there'll be no children for you. You have been fixed. Only frenuliters are allowed to have that. Once again, Aggie recalled the cool and calming hand of her mother, stroking her hair, lifting her chin to match her gaze. But it's all for the best, or it has been explained. The burden of childbirth and all things that go with it have been lifted from those in our station. Others are better equipped, finer qualities, can offer more than people like, well, sweetheart. Without enduring the commencement procedure of your own child, you will not have to endure such sorrow, such angst, and oh, the worry, the questioning, the fear that a parent endures. But, Mama, I love you, you love me. And now women can have the exact same eye color they want for the baby, the shaped face, the full lips, the thick hair. She ran her hand along her ample frame. They can have the perfect body, Jerry laughed. Imagine no more dieting. Now I could go for that. And the most important thing, Jerry stood tall above her daughter. The most important thing, they can be smart, so smart. Mama, what is smart? What does it mean when someone is smart? Do they know everything? Aggie noticed the change in expression and the way her mother turned to hide it. Yes, my dear, they know everything. 11 months had passed, and with each day, Maria had fallen more and more in love with her baby, Ariel. Royal had too. Maria had admired her husband's stoicism and the strength he showed. Despite his love, he knew what was best, and he would be there for her when the time came. I didn't expect her to live this long, he mentioned one day as they sat in the nursery watching their daughter, gazing into the mirror. Maria nodded. She had not expected it either, and after the third doctor visit, she believed her daughter would be gone in a few weeks or so, Dr. Phillips had explained. It was after that third visit, after the line of sojus that had been administered, she had been administered twice daily. It is the unnecessary appendix, the doctor said. The formation of the organs. They should be different. He looked sadly into Maria's eyes, touched her lightly on the arm, and expressed heartfelt sympathy about the inevitable death of her daughter. But the torrential rain, the desire to keep her daughter dry, the overpacked tote, and in being in a hurry, alas, the package of drugs slipped away from the packed coat. Then the waters washed it into the curbside drain unnoticed. A day passed, and Maria had forgotten about the sojuice that first day. The second day, she was too ashamed to mention the loss of the pills to Royal. The third day, Ariel cooed louder and laughed louder than Maria had ever heard. Miss Maria, I think your baby is doing fine, Aggie commented. She ate very well and no crying when we changed her diaper. You know, I really never thought she seemed sick at all. The appointment was a scheduled well check, and the doctor explained and gave me meds. Maria thought for a moment. Well, she looks fine to me. Doesn't seem like she needs any medicine. Dr. Phillips said that in a couple of weeks I would notice them. He said with her medicine passing wouldn't be painful. I have a friend who gave her daughter the sojuice to ease her pain. The child did go peacefully a month later. The women looked at each other and said nothing. Aggie left the room. Dear Doctor, dear, Dr. Phillips was in touch with me this afternoon, asked about Ariel. He said you came for the third visit a few weeks ago and hasn't heard from you since. Maria looked up from her reading, excuse me. The baby is doing just fine. No need to go back to the doctor. Her eyes studied Royal's as her soft lips parted to speak. I think she's trying to talk, and she said mama today. And she's getting into so many things, crawling everywhere, and I changed the diaper. What? Royal's frown turned upward as he drew close to Maria. Are you okay? I never felt better. The doctor mentioned that he believes it would be good when you go back to work at the company. He held a letter in his hands. A letter from the company reaffirms that. No. What? I mean, no. Ariel is fine. She's not going to pass away, Royal. She's so healthy and happy. She laughs all the time and plays. I love playing with her. You play with her? Dr. Phillips says he wants you to bring her in for examination. He mentioned she was on medication. Have you been giving her the medication? Maria said. I lost the packet, Royal, and Ariel does not need medication. She is fine. As she followed her husband into the nursery, Maria pressed against the pulsing bell image near the door. In a few seconds, she heard Aggie's footsteps on the stairs. Has she been looking in the mirror? Aggie pressed by the couple, entering the room, gathering the baby from the crib. The mirror, so sorry to say, was broken. My fault. She laughed. Just like my mother said, it's 7 years of bad luck to break a mirror. Shrugging, Royal mumbled, never heard of that one. I've been letting her look in mine, Aggie said as she bit her top lip and waited to be admonished. What kind is it? No, sir, it's a simple mirror. Nothing special about my mirror. I mean, I'm plain and fluffy. She patted her stomach. Mother almost made me biscuit. Aggie stifled a laugh as she noticed the man's perplexed look. Reaching for Ariel, Royal pulled the child to his face, examining the cleft chin, the mole, the larger whatever nostril. He questioned as he studied her face closely. Her eyes were a soft brown, only a little darker than her hair. Her tiny lips made a perfect bow before drawing into a broad grin. Tiny fingers grabbed at his nose. Dada, she squeezed gently as they ran the palm of her hands along his face. Dada, he says, he who? Dr. Phillips says the image jury wants to examine her. He asked about the mirror. He wants to resume the medication. He says any improvement is a temporary symptom of the disease. The softness of her fingers touched his lips. Her fingers felt along the tissue of his mouth. Ariel giggled loudly. Dada. The wet fingers slid from Royal's mouth into her own, and the baby giggled once again. She pressed her head against her father's and then leaned into his chest. Sir, you may not be approved. Some of my friends ran partially. There are good jobs, maybe not as fine, and homes, maybe not as family. But, sir, the children. Royal settled his daughter on his hip, pulled his wife to his side. Thank you, Aggie. I guess we need to pass. So that was the first of two stories that Carol and Ross had written. Um, it's they are pretty amazing stories. So I'm going to head into the second story, and hopefully you all will enjoy it. Um, the next story is called Tupper. Now, this one is a far cry different from the one that I had just read. Um, when authors write several different genres, they have like an increased, I look at it as an increased talent because it's like you're always challenging yourself. When you're a writer and you write one way, and then, you have your writing style, but then sometimes you decide to, um, you know, change it up a bit. If you are writing from a very different genre to another one, then your writing style has to change in order to tell the proper story. And of course, when you are writing a genre, you want to make sure that it's unique to the genre. Your story is unique. No stereotypes or cookie cutter things. I have read so many stories throughout my life, and these past 10 years, I've read more than I have ever read. So I have learned, and it has even helped my own writing style about when I read other people's. I have also found that there were genres that I wouldn't necessarily buy for myself, but after reading some of those genres, it's like, oh, I want to read more and more and more. I have my go-to authors, celebrity authors like James Patterson. I like his Women's Murder Club. I like his Alex Cross series. I've even watched the movies and any show that has ever been about one of his stories. My other um, one is I love Stephen King, his movies, his writing. Um, I'm the kind of person that if there is a book about something um, on the big or small screen, then I want to read it and watch the show or movie or whatever, because I like to see the differences and also see which one is better. And usually, 9 times out of 10, I find that I like the book better than the movie, but I still may like the movie. It's not always about, oh, yes, movie sucks, book is great. But there have been some. I have tried to watch a few books or a few movies that about a book that I have read, and I couldn't get through it because it was like nothing. It was like a totally different story, or it just seemed very mundane. Anyways, moving forward to Tupper by Carol Ann Ross. And this one is extremely, I mean, the other one was pretty amazing. And this one is it's very it's interesting and it's thought provoking. It makes you really think about things and question things as well. Tupper by Carol Ann Ross. The sound of the drums beating, brass horns blowing, floats covered in pink and white flowers, and the lilt of laughter along with the gentle push of the crowd felt so familiar and welcoming. Marla had come to the Azalea Festival in Wilmington her entire life. She loved it, but today, well, she wasn't sure. This was a strange one, at least for her. For one, where was the sunshine? Stretching her neck and studying the darkening sky overhead, she thought, oh, yeah, looks like rain. It's going to rain. Sighing heavily, the 20-something girl rolled her eyes and turning her attention to Jerry, standing only a few yards away. He too was studying the darkening skies. She watched him shrug and then turn his focus on the progression of the high school band's beauty queens and clowns parading down Front Street. She noticed his unkempt hair, the old baggy jeans, and wrinkled shirt he wore. And though someone had said he was being selfish, Marla was certain that Jerry's odd smell had nothing to do with style. Obviously, he had no interest in how clean he was or how he presented himself to the world or even her. It didn't seem like he had cared about such things for quite a while, at least for the last few times he had seen her. Now, he didn't look nearly as attractive as the first time she'd met him, or had simply been awed by his resemblance to Justin Timberlake for that first time and not noticed anything else. His manner changed too. He seemed somewhat annoyed with her recently, showing up late for dates, begging for money for one thing or another. Today, that morning, when she picked him up, he even refused to meet her eyes. Belle and Pete, who were along for the ride, had seemed somewhat aloof too. If it hadn't been for the fact she had promised to take them to the festival weeks ago, she wouldn't have even bothered with them. Now she regretted the promise. Groaning softly to herself, she grappled for a few minutes with the ambiguous feelings that she now had for the three. If Jerry doesn't like me anymore, that's okay, she thought. The feeling is certainly mutual. It's just a matter of making the break. She sighed again, but I did tell him his little friends too. She curled her lip, that I would drive everyone to the festival today. Oh, how I hate it when I make promises I don't really mean. I said it, so I have to do it, she chided herself aloud. Turning her attention towards the floats and the little clown cars, Marla mustered a smile, then winced as she felt a drop of rain and then another on her skin. Darn it, the weatherman said there was only going to be a 20% chance of rain today, she mumbled. She searched the crowd of people, looking for Belle, and found the blonde girl only a few feet behind her. Catching her attention, she shrugged. Guess it's going to be 20% any minute now. Belle sneered and grunted, then held a bare arm from her side to test for drops of rain. I thought I felt something, but was hoping it was a bird. She tittered briefly. But nope, it's raining all right. She pushed back against the stranger moving towards the crowd and reached to grab her boyfriend's hand. Pete slid an indifferent glance to Marla and then pulled Belle into the alcove of a nearby store. They turned to face one another and kissed quickly before joining in with the growing groans of discontent rising from the people lining the sidewalks and streets as the skies broke open. Immediately, the crowd was moving in all directions. Some opened umbrellas, others pressed against storefronts, hoping to wade out of the shower. Still others pushed their way through the throng of parade goers toward their vehicle. Abruptly, Marla and Jerry found themselves shoved into an alcove with Pete and Belle. Pete leaned into Belle and pulled his light jacket over his head, half shielding his girlfriend from the progression of raindrops that burst from the sky. Told you it was going to rain today, but you wouldn't listen. Pete looked directly at Marla and then wrapped an arm around Belle. She leaned in closer as he flashed another disapproving look towards Marla. Not bothering to hide his annoyance, he growled, "So where'd you park your car?" "Yeah, where'd you park your car?" Jerry echoed. "I parked on Ann Street, about halfway down on the right," Marla responded timidly. Pete nodded and grasping Belle's hand tighter, pulled her along as they jogged towards Ann Street. Jerry's eyes hastily swept over Marla's face as he proceeded to follow the other two, leaving her to trot along behind. She sighed and licked the rain from her lips. "How do you think they're going to get in? I have a key." She grinned and felt for the keys in her jean pocket, watching in the distance as the others rode. Was she saddened because Jerry wasn't holding his hand and was leaving her behind to safely alone? No, she answered. She knew why. She knew they were over there. She had known it for a while. His actions today just submitted, and she just found herself feeling not hurt, but indifferent. On the other hand, she did feel somewhat abandoned since she was, after all, the one who had driven the group to the parade. Even though she dropped them off early and closed to the facility, then parked the car and walked back through the crowd. Fool, she muttered, some friends I got. She moved closer to St. Anne Street, or to Ann Street, the rain pelting her short dark hair, leaving it to drip in her eyes. She brushed the limp strands to to the side of her face. Why do I do this? Try to be friends with people I have really nothing in common. I don't fit in, not with them anyways, she thought as she slowed her pace. What the heck? It doesn't matter if I keep up with them or not. As she walked towards the car, Marla listened to the crowd, the voices, and as they passed by her, a few of the people were angry. She heard a few complaints, but not many. Most were laughing about getting caught in the rain or expressing sympathy for the people on the floats and the marching band. It made her smile. Not everybody was a grouch. Ann Street was a little more than a block away, and she could see her parked car and noticed the fogged window. Didn't I lock my car? She asked aloud before she approached the driver's seat. Marla looked curiously at the occupants. All three were in the back seat, and she was obviously done now. All three glared at her, meeting her gaze of disseration. All but Pete turned away. His defiant sneer dared her to comment. There was one thing Marla knew that Pete loved, and that was confrontation. She was not about to take the bait. She met his eyes, grinned, and looked at Belle. Whiny Belle hated confrontation. I used the spare key you gave me. Marla shot her a heated stare. If I remember correctly, I asked you to put the key back in the desk drawer after you borrowed my car last week. Oops, must have forgotten, Belle tittered. Well, if she hadn't had the key, we would have been standing out here in the rain, getting soaked and wet, waiting on your slow butt, snarled Pete. I could throw your butt out of my car and make you walk all the way home, Marla thought. But right now, she didn't feel like getting in with Pete or anyone. She wanted to go home. Why? She closed her eyes and whispered, reminding that she dug this hole and she was the only one to get herself out of it. Marla held her hand out. Keys now. Her eyes blazed into Belle's timid one. True to form, Belle began sniffling. Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't mean she dug deep in her purse and handed the keys to Marla. It's just that I haven't. See what you did now, Pete spat. Same old crap. Every time she gets caught with her hand in the cookie jar, she starts crying, whining, and it's always because of something else, somebody else. It's never her fault. She's always the victim. Shaking her head, Marla slid the key into her purse and guided hers into the ignition, then checked her mirrors and fastened her seatbelt. The rain was still coming down, but not as nearly as steady as before. She turned on the windshield wipers and slowly pulled away from the curb. The trio in the back giggled and grunted. Marla felt Pete's knees in the back of her seat, but she wasn't about to mention it. For certain, he was aware of what he was doing, and when she looked in the rearview mirror, she saw the wicked sneer plastered on his face. She was familiar with the sneer, and she despised it. Marla heard the click of Belle's purse as she opened it and noticed the girl move her hands around inside of it, opening it wider and nudging Pete to look in. What games are they playing now? She thought. Her eyes moved to the street, then back to the trio in the back seat. She noticed how Belle and Pete nodded to one another, how they grinned and glanced her way. Marla sighed lightly, figuring they were up to something, but she slept it off, preferring to concentrate on the ride home. At the stop sign, she glanced once again in the back seat and then to the family of four, mother, son, and mother, father, son, and daughter, holding hands, laughing in the rain soaked them. They seemed delighted with the wetness as they splashed through the roadside puddles. After they crossed the street, Marla pulled forward, drove another block to another stop. Another family crossed in front of them, and she moved forward again to the next block and the stop sign. Why don't you go over to Market Street so we don't have to go through all the stop signs and jerky driving? I swear, where did you learn to drive? Walmart? Marla ignored Pete and drove another block. Here there were no people. There were hardly any traffic either. She looked to the right and then to the left, thinking that she might try to get to Market, despite the probability that it was bumper to bumper traffic. And then she saw him. He stood on the edge of the curb, his brown eyes looking directly into hers. Poor doggy, she said to herself out loud. Rolling down the window, she looked more closely at the dog. He seemed so scared and lonely. Hey, don't you dare let that darn dog in this car, Pete ordered. If he hadn't said it with such vehemence, if he had been so cruel and disdained ever since she'd known him, maybe she wouldn't have done it. But the instant the last syllable left his wretched lips, Marla opened the door and patted her thigh. Come on, boy, come on in. Without delay, the little dog hopped on her lap, and she could feel his wet paws through her jeans. Dang, stinking dog, Jerry scoffed. Now he speaks. Sniveling little man, what in the world did I ever see him? She reached her hand to ruffle the little dog's thick fur and felt the thin strap of a leather collar around his neck, thinking that perhaps should pull over and check the collar for a name or address. Marla glanced into the rearview mirror. Bella had her hand cupped to Pete's ear and whispered something. Jerry was leaning as close as he could, hoping to catch a word. On second thought, I don't think I'll pull over right now. In a bit. Besides, I like the company of this dog. She looked down again and twined her fingers in the damp hair, reaching up the dog licked Marla's face. A low groan drifted from the back seat. That makes me sick. You don't know where that dog has been, and you don't know where else he's been licking. Take, Taking a quick look in the rearview mirror, Marla caught Pete's eyes. He glared at her before leaning into Belle. The dog is going to ruin everything, the blonde whispered too loud. Huh? Ruin what? What are you talking about? Nothing, Pete growled. He must be hearing things. He shot an explosive look of contempt to Marla. She pressed on the gas and moved forward. Suddenly, the back seat was quiet. The hint of grin settled on her lips as she drove along the streets, turning at 14th Street and then on to Market. Still, the backseaters hadn't said a word. I think I'll pull over at this gas station and check out the puppy's collar. Maybe there's an address. As she pulled into the Exxon station, she glimpsed in the rearview mirror and only to catch the scornful expressions of the three passengers. Pete grumbled something to Jerry as Belle sat with her hands in her purse, scrounging again for something or another. Here it is, Morley exclaimed as the car idled. Tupper. His name is Tupper. Tupperware, Pete guffawed. That's a stupid name. I didn't say Tupperware. I said Tupper. Just plain Tupper. Well, it's still stupid, added Jerry. Now, what would Jerry say if I told him he was stupid? Would Pete stand up for Jerry, or would he agree with me? Pondering the question for a few moments, Marla was surprised that if she did say anything about Jerry's lack of attendance, it would start a row. It's not worth it. Rubbing her thumb across the dirt across the name tag again, she made out an address, 406 Lightning Rod Lane. She spoke it out loud, 406 Lightning Rod Lane. What's that? Where's that? Hey, I just want to go home, Pete snarled. We spent all day in the rain and riding around with a smelly dog. The whole day's been wasted. Yeah, Jerry hissed. Just dump them out here. I glanced in the mirror at her so-called boyfriend, and Marla suddenly felt embarrassed. God, what did I see in him? Oh, why did I let him kiss me? She noticed a glob of spit in the corner of his eye. If I had a rock to crawl under, or corner of his lip, if I had a rock to crawl under, I'd do it. Hey, do you even know how to get to Lightning Rod Lane? I've never heard of it. Probably way out in the boonies, Pete barked. Marla ignored the question and tapped in the address on her phone. By now, Tupper was lying peacefully in the front seat, his head resting on his paws. Occasionally, Marla would reach her hand to stroke his thick fur. He kind of looks like a Lhasa Apso. Sorry about that. She thought he's black and white and has that little beard they are named for, or some kind of terrier. Tupper opened his eyes and wagged his tails as Marla petted him. He is sure a long way from home. Hopper opened his eyes and wagged his tail as Marla petted him. He is sure a long way from home. He must be lost or cornered that just doesn't want him. Another glance in the mirror reassured Marla what she'd been thinking all day. She no longer liked or trusted the three friends in the back seat. She trusted the strange dog much more. They seemed like strangers now, like she'd never really known them at all, and she questioned herself again as why she had ever befriended them. Marla's thoughts drifted back to the day she met Belle, who was at the bank. She had gone in to make the weekly deposit for the Eastern Boat Works, her business, hers now. With her father's passing, she was now the sole owner. And oh, how much she missed her father. They had been close, spending most of her waking hours either at a shop or on the water, fishing, diving, and skiing. She loved it all. Her father's unexpected death had been a shock. Marla rubbed her chin and thought warmly of her father. He had died too young. Maybe his passing had made her lonely too, but she'd met Bill at the bank. She seemed nice, she was quiet, friendly, and her eyes begged for friendship, and Marla had a heart that couldn't say no. They started taking breaks together, and a couple times went out on Marla's boat. When Pete popped up at the lunches, and even once he joined them on the boat, he seemed a nice enough guy, although not very talkative and standoffish. Once he appeared to be brooding, but Bell excused his behavior by saying it was Pete's way and that it took him a while to warm up to people. Marla reached the pet Tupper once again. The look in his eyes this time was different, maybe forlorn. Yes, she thought, that's it. But why is this little dog unhappy? Maybe he doesn't want to go home. Maybe he'd rather go home with me. I'd love to have a little dog like him around. 2 miles, then turn on Cumberland Road, a soft-spoken voice from the GPS. Marla thought about the possibility of keeping Tupper and glanced at the dog again. You want to come home with me? Marla dared not say the words out loud, but as if the dog heard her, his ears perked and he wagged his tail. Shaking her head, Marla whispered, that would be stealing. Instantly, the dog's ears drooped, blinked his eyes, and rested his head on his paws. Marla tittered softly as her thoughts returned to when she met Belle, Pete, and Jerry. Yes, Pete was always a little strange, but he was Belle's boyfriend, and none of my business. And then she talks me into meeting Jerry. Ugh, what an idiot I was. She held back a laugh, realizing that not only was she an idiot for Jerry, for dating Jerry, but he really was an idiot, dumb as a doorknob, she thought. Can't keep a job. He doesn't have a single thought of his own that isn't put there by Pete. Marla sighed as she contemplated the young man's physique. But he does look good when you clean him up. Yep, he could be another Justin Timberlake. Twice he asked to borrow money. She obliged him the first time. She never did get that back, so when she declined him the second time, he started acting distant. Marla took another quick look in the mirrors. All had bowels when they were holding their phones, texting. She studied their expression. Jerry looked pensive, serious, his mouth pursed. Pete's lips, Pete's lips were curled upwards, and Bill's mouth hung open as she moved her thumbs quickly across the keyboard of her phone. It's about me. They're texting nasty things about me. Turn right at Border Street. The words in GPS startled her for a moment. Turning on border. Marla thought of the things her father used to say. You don't have to be friends with everyone, just be nice. Take care of yourself before you try saving the world. Wish I could have remembered that, Marla sighed. I need to give friendships time because these friends all feel so wrong. I should have listened to Daddy. He always told me to go with my gut. She shook her head softly. Now my gut says to say no to Belle, a very ashamed no to Jerry, and a most emphatic no to that mean Pete. He has always been intimidating. Tupper stood in his seat and wagged his tail, his tongue hanging from his mouth, dripped a few drops of saliva. That's nasty. It was hot in the car and very humid outside. Maria reached to turn on the air conditioner. Ordinarily, she would have rolled the windows down, but with the rain, the AC would have to do. She reached to pat the little dog. It'll cool off in a few minutes, sweetie. The little dog released, excuse me, a tiny yap and pranced in his seat, placing his paws once again on Marla's thighs. He reached to lick her cheek. What is it, boy? Stupid dog is nuts. You're gonna catch something from that. Well, Pete spoke the words commandingly, as if he were an authority on dogs. But of course, Pete always acted as if he knew it all. His parents didn't have to waste any money on college for him. He already knows everything. Marla chuckled to herself. What are you laughing about? She's not gonna be laughing, Belle snickered. Pete jabbed Belle in the side, his tight jaws clenching. He whispered something to her. She stretched to hear the words, but had no luck. What's going on? There was no answer. Instantly, a sense of discomfort swept Marla. She knew what the three in the back were up to. Focusing on the road ahead, she could feel her heart pounding rapidly in her chest. Tupper whined and then growled. Turn right at the next intersection, the GPS sounded. Marla pulled into the left lane and waited for a car to pass. Turn right at Lightning Rod Lane and proceed 1/2 mile. Obeying the GPS, Marla pulled into a narrow dirt road and drove as ominous silence filled the car. You are at now 406 Lightning Rod Lane. The word soothed Marla. She pulled in front of a nearly obscure structure surrounded by oaks with low-hanging branches and dripping moss. The rain had stopped and a hazy mist filled the air. Marla searched the trees to find a tiny blue cottage that sat hidden among the thick, rambling greenery intertwined from wisteria. Its pungent aroma draped the scene of the whirring dragonflies clouded the yard and surrounding area. Nervously reaching for the car's door handle, the frightened girl opened it, and she and Tupper bounded out. Expecting the dog to run to the front door, Marla was puzzled when Tupper reached his front paws to her thighs and barked loudly. Was it the tingling chill of early spring, the breeze, the rain, goosebumps raised? It seemed her entire body. There was no reason to be afraid. Not out here, out of the car where she felt the menacing presence of her three companions. She studied her surroundings. They were foreign, and she wasn't even sure if they were welcome. Turning to watch the others slowly exit the car, Marla turned to the little blue cottage for solace and gradually walked towards the door. Her steps became nervously as she walked on the uneven cobblestone. Then, balancing herself, she stepped forward more carefully to the entrance. She could hear mutterings from the three behind her, but she wasn't about to stop and ask them what they were saying. Marla only knew that the strange cottage seemed more friendly than they did. She wondered, was someone home? Would they offer her protection? Just what was happening? Nothing felt right. Nothing felt safe except for the little dog Tupper, and the hope behind the wooden door was safety. Marla tapped on it lightly and it swung open a bit. Tupper pushed it open even further with his nose, looking up at her as to invite her in. You're not going in that house, called Belle. Marla pushed the door open wide and walked across the threshold. It was dark and faded. A taxidermy snake perched on the end table seemed to hiss at her. A dusty rock fox stared at her blankly from the sidewalk, and she could have sworn she heard a neigh from the horse's head from the fireplace. Turning, she saw Pete, Jerry, and Belle, and they had stopped at the door, their backs turned to her, lowered as they spoke in undertones. Pete's eyes rose to meet her. What is what was it? They were now all looking at her threateningly. She called to the house, hoping for a response, and as she looked at the furnishing and dead animals staring from the wall, she simply walked farther into the cottage. Hello, hello, is anyone home? I found your dog Tucker, your little black and white dog. Did you lose him? There was still no response, and she looked back at the people with whom she had driven, who were all standing just outside the entrance. Pete spewed a line of spit toward a bush. There's no one here, he sneered. You're all alone out here with that mutt. Yeah, took you on a trip to know it. We've got to do it today. Marla could have sworn she heard Pete add. Jerry leaned to peer at her and attempted to spit a stream of spit towards the vinery, but the dribble fell against his chin. He raised a bare arm to wipe it away. Belle, her mouth once hanging open, was searching through her oversized purse. Marla saw her head jerk. Pete. Listen to Pete. But shut your freaking mouth, she'll hear you. Had they forgotten she was right there, not 30 feet from her? She scoffed for only a minute. Dumb, dumb, dumb. Her fear quickly returned when she noticed they had all gathered to huddle, commencing on a long whisper of conversation of only she's and hers, among other words she could not bear. Oh, so there you are, a grainy sounding voice pierced the silence. A tall older woman, maybe in her 60s, came from behind the partition. She snapped her fingers at the dog. Where did you go this time? She eyed the dog scornfully and then winked. What have you been up to? What have you brought home to me? The old woman eyed Marla, a smile growing across her face as she studied the frightened young woman. Feeling her chest rise and fall, Marla gulped a deep breath before speaking. He was downtown at the parade. It was raining. I let him in my car. She pulled her, uh, the woman pulled her shoulders back, her thin chin squared as she ran long yellow nails near the side of her face catch several stray strands of hair, and then settle it back into the bun at the nape of her neck. She sucked in the air and released a heavy sigh and lifted her head higher. If Marla had known it was possible, she would have believed that the old woman took breaths and grew taller. Smoothing the skirt of her long gray dress, the old woman slid a glance from the dog to Marla and back again. He always did like pretty young things. Moving closer, the woman picked at a spot on her dress, one of many. Some sort of stain, Marla said. She eyed the thick cloth of the dress. It had many stains. She must be hot now, girl. I know it's hot, and this dress is hot, and it's muggy and humid outside. She bent to reach her bony fingers to Tucker's muzzle. Gingerly, he smelled them and looked at the woman's eyes. See what you missed? Next time, don't go wandering off. The woman rose again, seemed even taller. Perplexed, Marla stuttered. Just praying not to worry, my dear. I've been fixing a late lunch in the kitchen. Tupper loves tongue. She raised her head and winked. Tongue sandwich. Would you like one? Unconsciously wrinkling her nose, Marla shook her head. No, thank you, ma'am. Oh, I see you have friends with you. The woman leaned to the side and studied the people standing outside. The intensity of the green eyes took Marla's breath away, and she felt like gasping for air. Oh, I see they are not your friends, are they? She lowered her eyes and whispered garbled words, then lifted them to meet Marla with a broad grin. We all came to the parade together, Marla answered nervously. Holding her skirt of her dress to the side, the woman swept by Marla. A sharp pop and a crack echoed in the thick spring as she passed by to lean against the door frame and stretch out an arm to the other side. Reaching into a pocket, she tossed the treat to Tupper. He jumped and snapped it and quickly as it came toward him. Good dog. The old woman winked before setting her gaze on the three in her lap. I see you. The words seemed blown through a tongue. My name is Decibel King. The wind raised as she spoke. Tendrils of her hair blew from her tight bun. Her long bony fingers pulled strips of cloth from her hair where it had become matted. She threw them to the ground. Do you not hear me? I am Decibel King. Pete looked toward Decibel. He squinted his eyes and then raised his hands above him as if the sun were glaring. Pulling his lips inward, he cast a repentant gaze towards Marla. Jerry stepped forward, close to where Decibel stood. Tuh, tuh, he began. Tuh, tuh. His mouth agape and his hands flew to cover it. Belle inched along the cobblestone. Huh? Losing her balance, scraping her knee. The contents of her purse spilled out in the ground. Quickly she reached her hand to retrieve a long bladed knife and scoot it back into the faux leather bag. A puzzled expression on her face. Tuh, tuh, tuh. She reached her fingers inside her mouth. Ah, yip. Her eyes widened and gasped with horror. Tears streamed down her throat, and she looked at Marla, the dog, and the old woman. Cat bite your tongue? Decibel came, asked Snively, her eyes glaring, the long nails in her hands drawing about her chin and her feet. Pete screamed at what could be the word now. He repeated it again and again, pointing at the little black and white dog. Duh, dog, eh. He looked angrily at the old woman and then to Piper. Decibel grinned Marla. Can't understand the word the voice said. Captured from wisp hair that strayed so violently from her hair earlier. She tucked them back into this. I have those sandwiches in the kitchen. Tupper loves tongue. The little dog stood on the copper stone steps, his tail wagging as Decibel King tossed another treat his way. He barked happily, looked to Marla as if to ask her to join him, and then led the way back into the house and its safety. So that was another very good and interesting story by Carol and Ross. And I hope that you listeners will pick up some of her books. You can type in Carol and Ross on Amazon, and you will get go to her Amazon profile page, and you'll be able to purchase her books. Also, don't forget about the short story contest, amy'sbookshelfreviews.com/short-story-contest. And, follow the instructions. There's still time to get your story in. You can read all about the requirements. So if you're an author who wants your book to be on the show, go to amy'sbookshelfreviews.com/podcast for more information. If you're an author and you want your book to be reviewed, go to amy'sbookshelf.com for more information. Thank you, and I'll talk to you again. This has been Amy's Bookshelf Reviews podcast. Thank you for listening. And always, be kind and stay safe. Thank you. Next week.